Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about simplifying the radical expressions and rationalizing the denominator. What is the meaning of rationalizing the denominator? If we have any radical expressions, same as radical 5 over radical 7, something like this one, okay? We shouldn't keep the denominator radical at the denominator. We always have to remove the radical from the denominator, and we call it rationalizing the denominator. Removing the radical from denominator, the name of this action is rationalizing the denominator. Same as, I'm just refreshing your mind, if we have 5 over 15. Yeah, this is a fraction, but it's not in the simplest format. We have to simplify it as much as possible, which is going to be 1 over 3 if we simplify by 5. 1 over 3 is the simplified format of 5 over 15. Same as this one. When we have radical 5 over radical 7, is not in the simplified format, most simplified format, because we have to remove the radical from the denominator, and the name of this action, as I already told, is the rationalizing the denominator. How we can rationalize the denominator? Okay. Before going forward for this one, I just want to explain a little bit about multiplying the radical. As I told you in the previous video, when we have radical AB, we can write it as radical A times radical B. Radical A times radical B give us radical AB, or vice versa. Radical AB give us radical A times radical B. As an example, if I have A squared, B squared, C, okay, I can separate it using this formula. I can separate it as radical A squared times radical B squared times radical C using this formula. This multiple sign is optional. I can write it or I can remove it. I can write it radical A squared, radical B squared, radical C. When there is nothing between the radical, again is multiplication. Now radical A squared, I can take it out of the radical, and this one make it A 2 divided by 2. The index is blank, it means it's 2. So this one gonna be A, this one gonna be B, radical C. Yeah, that's why radical A squared, B squared, C, simplified format is radical A is equal to A, B, radical C. We are gonna use this formula to simplify or to rationalize the denominator of these fractions. Let me now, if I multiply radical 2 times radical 2, what is the result of this one? It's going to be radical 2 times 2, which is going to be radical 4. 2 times 2 is radical 4, and a square root of radical 4 is going to be 2. Okay. The same formula, radical A times radical B is equal radical AB, I already explained, and vice versa. So radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 2 times 2 radical 4, or is equal to. What is the meaning of this one? If we multiply a radical, yeah, in the index of 2, a square root, if we multiply by itself, we can simply take it out of the radical. Radical 5 times radical 5 is going to be 5. Okay, or radical x times radical x is going to be x. Remember, we can do this one only for when the radicals are, the index are blank or the index are 2. When we are multiplying 5 times 5 is 5 to the power of 2, and because the index is 2, we can take it out. So remember this one, any radical as an example 15. Multiple by itself, radical 15 times radical 15 is going to be 15. Okay. We use the same rule to simplify, to rationalize this fraction. Raise this part. I'm raising this part because if you want to just look at the video again, you can go back a little, you can return it back and watch it again, so I don't need to state for you to take note or whatever. You can review the video by yourself again. Now, for simplifying this one, because I want to remove the radical from the denominator, what should I do? Is radical 5 over radical 7. If I multiply the denominator by radical 7, then radical 7 times radical 7 is going to be 7. The 7 comes out of the radical. Radical 7 times radical 7 is going to be radical 7 to the power of 2, or we can take it out, it's going to be 7. But whatever I'm doing in the denominator, I have to do the same thing in the numerator. So it means I have to multiply this by radical 7 over radical 7. Radical 7 over radical 7 is 1. Any fraction with the equal denominator and numerator is equal to 1. It means I'm not changing this fraction because I'm multiplying by 1, or numerator and denominator are the same. So what is the result? For the numerator I have radical 5 times radical 7, and what I have for the denominator, radical 7 times radical 7 is going to be 7. Okay? Simplify just the numerator. Radical 5 times radical 7 is radical 5 times 7 is 35 over 7. Radical 35 over 7 is the rationalized format of radical 5 over 7. So if the question asks you rationalize radical 5 over radical 7, what we should do? We should multiply both numerator and denominator by the denominator, and the answer for this one is going to be radical 35 over 7. Okay? Then this form, the radical 35 over 7, is a rationalized format of radical 5 over radical 7. Let's do more example. I want to rationalize 3 over radical 2. I want to rationalize these radical expressions. Rationalize means removing the radical from the denominator. How can I remove the radical from the denominator? Multiply the denominator by radical 2, but whatever I'm doing with the denominator, I have to do the same thing with the numerator. So I need to explain radical 3 over radical 2 multiplied by radical 2 over radical 2. Then if I simplify this one, 3 times radical 2 is going to be 3 radical 2, and radical 2 times radical 2 is going to be 2. So 3 radical 2 over 2 is the rationalized format, or simplified format of 3 over radical 2. This result is the simplified format or rationalized format of 3 over radical 2. This action, we call it rationalizing the denominator of the radical expression. More example. The question asking simplified radical 1 over 3. 1 over 3 is completely under the radical. And the question asking simplified this radical expression. What can we do? I can write it as radical 1 over radical 3. Right? Radical 1 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. So it's going to be 1 over radical 3. But in the denominator, we have the radical, we should remove it. what should I do? I can multiply 1 over radical 3. I should multiply it by radical 3 over radical 3. Yeah. Why radical 3 over radical 3? Because I want to rationalize the denominator. Then 1 times radical 3 is going to be radical 3, and radical 3 times radical 3 is going to be 3. The simplified format of radical 1 over 3 is radical 3 over 3. Be careful. The question, maybe the question not ask you to rationalize the radical. The question asks you only simplify. When the question asking simplified expression, rationalizing the denominator is one of the steps that we need to do for simplifying the radical expression. If we leave the radical in the denominator, we have not finished our job. We haven't finished our job. We have to continue until there is no radical in the denominator to finish our job. Okay. One more example. Let's do question 36 of your book, page 350, question 36. Erase this part. Is radical 13 x y to the power of 5, 13 x y to the power of 5 over 40a3, 40a to the power of 3, and we want to simplify this radical. Remember, under the radical is a fraction, is a normal regular fraction. If it was possible to simplify the numerator and denominator, we can simplify it right now before bring it out of the radical. As an example, if I have x at the bottom, I can simplify x at the top with x at the bottom. But right now, the fraction by itself is in the simplified format. Now, what we should do, take it out of the radical. I can write it as radical 13 x y to the power of 5 over radical 40 a to the power of 3. Okay. Now, at the top, this 13 is not possible to bring it out of the radical, 8 is not possible, but this y5, I can write it as radical 13 x y to the power of 4 times y, and at the denominator, this 40, I can write it 4 times 10. 4 times 10, and this a to the power of 3, I can write it as a to the power of 2 times a. Okay? Now, I can take out this y to the power of 4 from the denominator. I can take out this y to the power of 4 and make it y squared. So it's going to be y squared for the top. 13 y remain under the radical, is not possible to bring it out. Y to the power of 4 is going to be 4 divided by index, which is 2. 4 divided by 2 is going to be 2. And what about the denominator? 4, I can take it out of the radical and make it 2. A square root of 4 is 2. And a square root of this a square is going to be a. So it's going to be 2a radical 10a. This 10 and this a remain under the radical. Okay? I bring out this 4 and this a square. Now, this is the simplified format, but I'm not done because the denominator is, I have radical in the denominator. I have to remove the radical from the denominator. How? I should multiply both numerator and denominator by radical 10a. Okay, so it's going to be multiplied by radical 10a over radical 10a. Okay, I don't need to multiply by 2a radical 10a because 2a is under the radical already. I just need to multiply by radical 10a. Okay, then what gonna happen? For the denominator I have y squared radical 13y multiplied by 10a. Here 13y multiplied by 10a. I put inside the bracket, you can put inside, you can just put the multiple sign. Let me put the multiple sign, maybe it's gonna be easier for to understand. Okay, 13y multiplied by, 10a, not y. Multiplied by 10a. Okay, 13y multiplied by 10a, and this y square is already on outside of the radical. And for the denominator I have 2a, then radical 10a times 10a. Oh, sorry, we don't need to radical anymore. 2a is out of the radical. Multiplied by 10 radical 10a times radical 10a, it's going to be 10a. Yeah, radical 10a multiplied by the radical 10a is going to be 10a under the radical. Just the radical going to be eliminated. So what's going to be the final answer? Y squared radical 13 times a 10 is 130 ay over 2a times 10a 20 a squared. This is the simplified format of the original question. A square root of 13xy to the power of 5 over 40a cubed, all of them under the radical. When we simplified it, it's going to be y squared radical 130ay over 20a squared.